It's not made that noise before.
Okay, it is now 10 o'clock and we will start. First of all, big welcome to everybody for being here, and particularly warm welcome to Eve, and we'll hear from her extremely shortly. Just before we kick into the meeting proper, we have some apologies today. Jackie Lee is unfortunately contracted COVID and won't be with us today. And Nisa is also caught up. Nisa Khan is also caught up in some issues where she's had to take on some personal care at quite short notice. And Jay Ahmed will be with us for the second part of our meeting in about an hour's time. Apart from that, we were all present and correct, I think. So we now move over to you, Eve. The floor is yours, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Phil. So I am going to attempt to share my screen. I'm not on Zoom very often, so please bear with me. I thought it easier to put some slides up, but I will take them down fairly swiftly at the end, just because I'm guessing I might lose sight of everybody. So let's just bring that up. Oh no, you're still all there at the slide. I go into a bigger mode. Okay, so can everybody see that okay?
You can.
Brilliant. Okay, lovely. So I'm coming to introduce you to Salford and Trafford Local Medical Committee. Some of you might have heard of us before. Some of you may not have a clue what we do. So hopefully by the end of this, which should be no more than 10 minutes, you'll have a better idea. And hopefully we can then have a discussion about how we might be able to work together as well. So I'm just going to go through what LMCs are in general terms, who we are as a committee, what we do, how we can work together, and then I can take any questions. So it's a slightly busy slide, but in a nutshell, LMCs have been around for over 100 years. They're recognised in statutes within the NHS, and we're basically an organisation that supports and advises general practice in the most basic sense, but also acts as a conduit between general practice and the rest of the system, because as you know, general practice is made up of lots of small businesses, and often other parts of the system find it difficult to know who to go to should they need to have a discussion that affects all general practice or one in particular. So people can either go to the practices themselves directly, or we're here to act as that sort of advocate and conduit. They're made up of local representatives of GPs and practice managers. So we represent Salford and Trafford, and they're a membership organisation that's funded by the practices. So there's a levy taken each month out of their global funding, which funds us, and we have direct links into the BMA. But the General Practitioner Committee in particular, which is the organisation which often does all the negotiation with NHS England on GP contracts and new services. So just a quick slide around the practices that we represent. So as I've mentioned, we are quite unusual in the fact that we span 2 localities, but for us, it's a real benefit because we can share the learning from between Salford and Trafford. So we have about 70 practices, 330 GPs, which covers the care of about 520,000 patients. And then we have quite a small team, which often these organisations that cover a lot of scope have quite a bijou team. So we have Dr. Arya Prabhakaran, who's our chair. He's a GP in Trafford, and also used to be a primary care network clinical director. We've got Jenny Wharton, who some of you may know. She was a former GP at the side. She's also a clinical lead at Salford CCG, leading on a number of different areas, including workforce and mental health. You've obviously got me. I've been in post about 5 years. My background is a registered nurse working at Wythenshawe in cardiology. And then I moved to be a CCG commissioner for about 15 years, primarily in Manchester and Trafford before coming over to the LMC. And the last role I did there was primary care quality lead. So I was the person to go in, check the quality of practices, and help with turnaround if it was necessary. Kerry has been a part of the team for over 10 years, helping us with our finances and administration. And Deborah is the newest recruit. Deborah's been a practice manager in Trafford for almost 30 years, has retired from doing that, but is a key part of our team in terms of all things to do with practice management. We also have, as well as being classed as an executive committee, we have 2 subcommittees, one for Salford and one for Trafford, which we go through an election process every 3 years. And again, there may well be some names there that you're familiar with in Salford. So we have a really good mix in Salford of GPs and practice managers, and we have each of the neighbourhoods represented by a doctor and a practice manager. And we're actively recruiting for a practice manager in Broughton at the moment, and the same for Trafford. But what that gives us is a really good mix of people, of expertise and reach as well. So if there's something that we want to go and find about in one of the localities or the PCNs, we can contact that particular subcommittee member and get some feedback, and they work with the practices. We have 2 subcommittees that meet. We both meet with those monthly. Jenny chairs the Salford one, and all the members come to that meeting, currently virtual. And we open those up as well to a number of key stakeholders across Salford. So we have the CCG, Healthwatch as well, following a discussion that Alex and I have had recently. There's a very welcome seat for you guys around our table there. We have the council, SPCT, who you're probably aware of as a primary care provider. Salford Royal, the invitation's just gone out to them, to Tara Kearney, and also Bruce from VCS. So we're really trying to make it as far-reaching and holistic as we can. So part A tends to be where people can come and give an update on key things that are happening in their specific areas of interest. And if they want to chat through something, whether there's a problem or an opportunity that they want to work with general practice, that's a really good forum to do it, because we have each of the neighbourhoods represented. And often people might just bring a pilot that they're doing to get some feedback, whether that would work, whether there's anything that they need to consider. But it's generally a good informal discussion about things that are important to Salford. And then we have a part B where we're discussing anything we need to as a group. Shall I pause there? Shall I keep going? Keep going. Okay.
Suggest you keep going in fairness. This is really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So just to give you a little bit about what we primarily do with our working week. So the LMC, whether it's us or anywhere else in the country, has 2 key functions. One is to represent and support and advise GPs and their practices, whether that's individual GPs who have got an issue that's solely affecting them personally or professionally, right through to an issue that might be happening that affects absolutely everybody and every member of the practice team. And we also have the responsibility to represent general practice at strategic level within the wider health and social care system. Because as I've said, obviously in Salford, we have 39 practices at all the different meetings. They can't all possibly be there representing themselves. So it would be something that the LMC are invited to do and attend and have some input into the meeting. From an individual practice level support, the sorts of things that we do, we can seek advice for practices from our retainer that we have with LMC Law, who specialises in providing legal advice purely for LMCs and general practice. We might be called upon if there's an element of sickness at a practice and they need some advice about occupational health or the well-being of their staff. We also get contacted if there's new legislation or regulation out, and sometimes practices need that sort of breaking down into the simplest form so it's easy to understand and implement, whether it's complaints. We also offer a service around CQC, so if we have a practice in either locality where CQC have gone in and found issues, they can come to us. I can go in, parachute in and help them turn around. And that's been a really interesting piece of work that I've brought with me from my CCG days, because you know, it's every single practice that I've gone in and done that with always find it quite a therapeutic process, and at the end of it feel like they're in much better shape as a practice. So it is, you know, it moves away from being sort of a tick box exercise to something that all the staff are engaged with, and culturally there's a real difference. And we also get heavily involved with disputes, whether it's a practice to practice or practice to other bodies. And we put on sessions for training as well, and if people need mentoring. So it's a really diverse amount of areas of help that we offer. In terms of the strategic side, so it would either be myself, Jenny or Aria that would attend a number of meetings in a month, representing Salford and Trafford, not only in those localities, but at GM level as well. And there's something called the Association of Greater Manchester LMCs, which we're part of, that don't just cover our area, but cover all the areas of Greater Manchester that we work with wherever possible. So we attend a huge amount of meetings between us, ranging from strategic boards, primary care network, collaboration groups, governing bodies. More recently with the ICS work, I'm working in Trafford with George Devlin quite a lot, who's one of the strategic leaders of the community collective, and part of the Trafford Living Well in My Community design group. And I work with Andrew Latham quite a lot, your counterpart over in Trafford, and we do discrete pieces of work together, which I can come on to talk about. So my final slide really was just to open up with discussion, or take any questions about how we might support one another as two organisations, because over my time doing this job and attending certain meetings, it's quite apparent actually that our organisations probably represent people that have similar frustrations, but maybe for different reasons. So I'm at a lot of joint meetings where Heather is there, and I often find that we do cover the same questions and raise the same points. And whilst she's obviously representing Healthwatch and patients' view, often there's similar problems, but from a GP provider perspective, that the two wouldn't necessarily see that there was commonality with that. And we've learned by looking at the issues together, we can then come up with the solutions that not only benefit the practice, but benefit patients. And rather than one forfeiting a solution, we found joint solutions. And really acting as a single point. So my proposal from today was, if there is something that you want to pick up around a particular practice, or you want to pilot something, then we could be that conduit into general practice for you. So if I stop sharing at that, but the last slide, which I have sent over, has our contact details on as well. But if I stop sharing there, and then I'm happy to take any questions.
And questions and comments welcome from board and staff, please. Rimpy talking, and I'll come to Mark after.
There you go. Can you hear me now? I was just saying it's certainly a comprehensive structure that you've got there.
It is now. Yeah, it's taken a while, but yeah, we've got quite a good system in place now, and it feels like we've got good, although we're very small, we've got reasonably good coverage where we need to be.
Okay, thanks. Mark?
Thanks for that, Eve. That was really interesting. I'm Mark. I'm part of the engagement team here at Healthwatch Salford with a special interest in primary care, shall I say.
Okay.
We have quite a good working relationship with all our GP practices across the patch. But it's really, really nice to obviously have that offer of invite to assist us with any future work. We will be looking at something to do with GP practices towards the end of the year. And I'm sort of tentatively now making conversations with people saying, can we get our heads together in, say, September, October time to talk about what a project could look like. So I welcome that opportunity. I'm sure Alex does too.
Yeah, that would be great, because what we did in Trafford earlier in the year, they were doing a piece of work around analysing all the GP websites to see how user-friendly they were and accessible, etc. And they came to us ahead of doing that piece of work to see if there was anything else that we could add into it that would make it meaningful. And I think the really positive piece that came out there, the report at the end, highlighted all the positive things that were going on, as well as obviously highlighting the things where there was a lot of variation, and there would be a recommendation of some key changes to the website. But rather than that just be between the recommendations and in Trafford looking at that 29 times over, I worked with Healthwatch to put some recommendations in that it involved other stakeholders that might have the key to doing some of that. So, for example, there was a distinct lack of a go-to portal for all the directory of services in Trafford. And the one that we did have in place through the council wasn't user-friendly at all. So we used Healthwatch understanding of what patients are needing, my understanding of what general practice needs, and then doing that piece to reinvigorate that particular portal so it benefits everybody. So it's a really pragmatic way of working where, there's one piece of work. So in your report, I did have a quick look at your business plan actually for the next year, and I saw that you were looking to do an insight report, and it might be something that you may consider as expanding that for a section that I could do some work of looking at what practices would find useful in other parts of the system if they were improved as well. So it becomes a joint piece that benefits practices and patients as well. Because often, I know from experience of feedback from practices, there might be an issue that patients are very conscious of, say, for example, especially with COVID, wanting to know when they're going to be seen in secondary care. Because they've been delayed for a long time, and practices are getting a deluge of calls asking them, but they don't have the portal that tells them when they're going to be seen. And it's like, so how can we work together to make sure patients are informed, but practices aren't overburdened by being the middleman, if you like. So there's lots of interesting things we can probably do. So I would really welcome catching up outside of this meeting, definitely.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Mark, for raising that. Alex, please.
Yeah, it's more of a comment. I think myself and Eve met a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's a really helpful opportunity to work with the LMC and partners around a collaborative approach to some of our work streams. I know us as a team and an organisation want to ensure impact throughout all of our work through obviously patient experience and also the experiences of providers and professionals within services. So I think this approach around collaboration is going to be really helpful, and obviously we'll take that that approach moving forward, and obviously linking more with the LMC around some of that direction going forward. So thank you for presenting today, Eve, and coming along to just share the work that you do and how we can work together more collaboratively.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay, anything from anybody else? No, in which case, just to echo what Alex has said, it's been really helpful you being here today. I didn't understand well what you did, and I do understand it. Very pleased to see my own doctor is listed on one of the committees.
Brilliant.
So yes, very pleased with the opportunity that Mark's identified and you've agreed to look at. And
Yeah.
I like to say, echo Alex's point about the general ability to work closely together and pick up where we've got strengths that support the others' work. So yeah,
that would be great. Thank you. And when you do, I noticed in your business plan, you're doing a review of other aspects, whether it be mental health or the acute setting. Again, I could quite easily pull in a section on there about some of the barriers for general practice, which ultimately would be a barrier for patients as well. So you know, don't just view me from a primary care perspective. I'm happy to input throughout.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Right.
I think having this conversation, your previous conversation with Alex, is all part of getting to know each other a bit better, so we're able to spot those opportunities and make use of them.
Yeah,
so,
brilliant.
you are very welcome to stay. This is an open part of the meeting, so you can stay as long as you wish, but if you have other things you wish to do, then...
Well, I will stay if that's okay.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. In which case we'll move on with declarations of interest. I have one to update about, and that's my resignation as a board member of Salford Keys NV Buildings Management Company. That's no longer an interest I have. Resigned from that as part of my move earlier last month. Is there anybody else who's any updates on declarations of interest? If not, I don't think we have any questions from members of the public. We then move on to the minutes of the last meeting. Are people happy to agree them as a true and correct record? Somebody nod vigorously. Who's a board member? Thank you. Accept them as true and correct. And I think the action log is all completed. So we content with that as well? Again, somebody nod vigorously who's a board member. Thank you. Okay. Move on to Chair's report, and I think the first thing is just to apologise for the dominance of the ICS issue. You know, it's something which is going to be part of Alex's feedback as well, but I'll focus on what's been happening at a Greater Manchester stuff. You know, there's been ongoing conversations within the Healthwatch in Greater Manchester network. There's going to be a meeting set up following a discussion with Warren Heppelet, who used to work for the City Council here. And we're going to be meeting with him and Sarah Price, who's now the Chief Officer of the Health and Social Care Partnership. And so I, along with Heather from Healthwatch Trafford and Peter and Maria from the Chief Officers Network, going to be meeting her very shortly. We're going to pre-meet as well. And I think part of that is about securing our place at the table, making sure we have the right opportunities to influence decision making and be part of it where it's appropriate. We've also, as part of that, I think, needed to look at how our own governance within the Greater Manchester Healthwatchers work. And I've been part of the long-term governance group as well. So we've been looking at how we deal with that, and there's proposals going to the Healthwatch in Greater Manchester meeting next week about how we might progress that. And that may be part of some change. As ever with all of this, our role, I suppose, is threefold. One is to make sure that Healthwatch collectively is within the new structures and operating effectively both at a neighbourhood, locality and Greater Manchester level. The second is that the issue which we'd want to raise above all others about patient and public voice isn't kind of forgotten about because everybody's interested in everything else. And the third is that, that there is some ability to understand that this incurs some cost and time. What was slightly disappointed in the health and social care bill as it stands is there's some recognition of our role and some recognition of voice. There's no recognition of funding to go along with that in increased role. I'll stop there. You've obviously all seen my report as well, but very happy to take questions and comments about what's happening at the moment or any other part of my chair's report. In that case, we'll move on. We can go on to Alex's report. Your turn, Alex.
Thanks, Phil. I think just to move on from that point around the ICS and locally, the position that we're in from a Healthwatch perspective, at the present time, we do have a seat on the ICS transition board. That board has now met, I think it's on 3 occasions. Our main perspective of that board is to ensure that patient engagement is a part of those conversations at both neighbourhood and that ICS level in GM, which Phil has alluded to there. We are part of the subgroup around governance. There are 4 separate subgroups attached to the ICS transition board. So we're part of those conversations, and there is a conversation around how the governance structure will work and where each organisation will fit in to that governance arrangement. So I can provide an update once that's agreed in terms of where we as an organisation will sit as part of that structure moving forward. So there will be, as part of the ICS transition board, an update in terms of the key decisions that are coming out of that meeting. I'll be able to share those key decisions with you once I've got that update from the lead in regards to that. So again, that'll be shared with you, but there's no current milestone markers in terms of what I need to update at the present time. We are just in the position of ensuring that engagement with the public is there and that's involved in the process. I see Kate's got a hand up.
If you could just break for 2 seconds to take Kate's point on this, please.
Yeah, it was literally just to say, well, thank you for all your work into it, because I know it is taking up a lot of time at the moment. But I also just wondered, I know we've said before that it's happened on paper. Is there any indication when we're going to actually see anything changing physically in the areas that we work as a result of it?
From my perspective, I've not got an update in terms of when things will change or the timeline. I know the shadow arrangements have to come in terms of the governance in October of this year, so I know there will be a timeline in getting to that and a decision made in September, but I can't give an association in terms of what that'll look like in terms of delivery, etc.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So I think that obviously is the ICS update at the present time. Obviously, I've provided a report for the work that we've undertaken as an organisation throughout the last 2 months. I think the strategy that we are working to, and that's come for board's approval under part 2 of the meeting, just to let you know, the consultation has been carried out with the public now. We also held a development session with the Health and Wellbeing Board, which was a really useful opportunity to get a reflection in terms of the locality plan, the direction of that plan, and associate our strategic direction and objectives aligned to that clear mission of that plan there. So just to make the board aware of that. We have our quality assurance framework now signed off by Healthwatch England. I've met with John Turner, who we had a useful, robust discussion about some of the action points in that plan, and that'll be coming back to our meeting in September in terms of action in those points that was raised. But it was a very positive meeting, and we are one of the first organisations in the network that have gone through this process of the quality assurance framework. And then just to note, we have been in the top 100 inclusive employers index ratings from the National Centre of Diversity. So I think that's a really positive achievement for the organisation, and it's something that we are on a journey with in terms of our EDI approach to our work. And I know Scarlett's going to be working closely with me in terms of progressing that forward in terms of the organisation. So in terms of our projects, there are a number of projects that we've got going on within the organisation, and I've just shaped all those projects into each area. I think in the interest of time, I won't go through each project individually, but I think there's some excellent work that we are undertaking. And again, I think the stress of a collaborative approach that we are having with providers in terms of making sure that the projects that we are running have impact in the certain fields that we are doing. So I think that's one point I want to note. In terms of our forward planning for the next 2 months, we have 3 main projects that we will be looking at, which will be the insight into dentistry in Salford. We'll be doing some work around the insight into domiciliary care in Salford, and then we'll be relaunching our Speak Up for Salford funding stream as well. So we'll be opening that back up for a period of time. So that's just to give you some insight there. And then in terms of some of the additional projects that we are supporting away from our business plan as such, there's 4 main areas there that we are supporting, all at different stages. And I think it's just to note that our virtual support toolkit is now really coming to a conclusion, and we will be publishing in partnership with the NCA, who are leading that piece of work, a press statement along with the toolkit itself, which will be a real supportive tool for groups who have not really been able to use digital platforms, health and social care groups, to support them getting back online and engaging with their service users. So it's an excellent toolkit, and obviously that will be shared with the board and obviously the wider community in Salford. And then also just to note the Safer Salford Lived Experience panel. We've been hosting that panel in partnership with Aqua, who are an organisation to support quality in Salford. We have now supported the recruitment of 6 volunteers onto that panel, and again we've provided an introduction and an induction to Healthwatch as part of that, so they will now take some of that quality work forward as part of the work plan of the Safer Salford work stream. So it's just to make the board aware that's progressed really well and we're on track with that. We will need to have a discussion around how we support that moving forward, because we did agree to support that in Q1 of this financial year. So that will be something to take forward in terms of how we support that as an organisation. Just to note around outreach and events, members of our team have supported the COVID-19 street engagement, which was a collaborative exercise to get more people uptaking the vaccine within Salford. So it was our first on the ground engagement exercise in different parts of Salford, talking to members of the public and trying to direct them into the vaccination buses which were out and about on the street. So that were a really positive engagement and outreach session, and it's taken us some reflections around how we then move our face-to-face engagement back up and running, which comes onto my next item around our staffing approach to how we're moving forward as an organisation in light of COVID. So at the present time, we still continue to work from home. There will be some reflections about how we support a transition back to some hybrid working within the office. So we have had a discussion at a staff team, and that'll be taken under part 2 of our board meeting to understand what that could look like as an organisation. And we have got some key meeting dates in our diary about looking at face-to-face engagement and also face-to-face volunteering. So they're just to really explore that option and see what that looks like for us as an organisation. Just to make the board aware that we are exploring it at the present time. And volunteers, so as I've talked about with Scarlett's inducted 6 volunteers into the organisation for the Safer Salford panel, and we have had 1 volunteer for our researcher role as well. So they've come into the organisation. Just to note as well, it was Volunteers Week back in early June. So I think as a board we're aware, we put on some celebrations around that, which was a really successful week, and showed appreciation to all our volunteers for the work that they do carry out for us as an organisation. And then again, we've implemented the updated volunteering policy, which was agreed at our previous board meeting. And then finally, just to touch on the digital aspect, which gives the figures of the reach that we've had as an organisation. And in the period, we've had 2,143 people in the last 2 months go over to our website, which is obviously a positive aspect, because that number is building month on month. So it's just to make the board aware that we are increasing our engagement figures each month. So at that point, I'll pause, and if there is any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you very much, Alex. That's a very comprehensive summary and a very good summary in the paper as well. Thank you for that, the work and the team are doing. Questions, comments, board?
Would I be able to ask a question?
You can.
Is that okay? You've been busy as a team, I can see. So just a couple of questions, Alex. You know, you mentioned on the ICS, sorry to go back right to the beginning of your update, but you mentioned you're on the governance pillar and group. Have you been invited to be on the other 3, or was it just specifically that one?
No, we were at request able to go to the other groups, but just because of our resource, we decided we are probably best placed around that governance area as an organisation. Yeah, I sit on that one as well. I didn't attend the first one, but I'll be there. And I'm also attending the finance one, and Jenny said, so if there is any updates, we can always feed those through if that's helpful as well to you. And then the other thing I just wanted to acknowledge as well, Phil, during yours, you mentioned about the huge amount of resource that's needed to be involved in the ICS. And it's something that we don't have a choice in as well. You have to be there in order to be forming part of that direction of things. And I know you said that there was no recognition of sort of funding. It's the same as well for general practice, interestingly. So people may have heard of the term primary care networks, and each area has a clinical director that's imposed to do a very particular remit on delivering a certain amount of services. And the ICS work has come along, but there's a massive national expectation for those clinical directors to be present in the ICS work. So it is something that we're liaising with at national level with GPC, because, you know, it is massively time consuming and takes everybody away, doesn't it, from their core business. And in Trafford, certainly we've spoken to the CCG about perhaps there needs to be a system approach to funding providers who don't have the infrastructure that can, you know, move mountains of people from one area to another. So it might be something that we need to consider in Salford as well, because it is a challenge, definitely.
It is problematic, and there's also a slightly more nuanced debate about the things which we have to do and therefore should be funded to do, and the things which we can offer, which we would be funded for quite separately. And that's all part of the conversation we're having with Sarah Price next week.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to kind of untangle some of that sometimes, because obviously if the ICS wants to get patient voice and public voice, we're well equipped to do so, and we can help them with that. And that would be on a funded basis. But in terms of us being sat at the table, like with the ability to contribute to the debates meaningfully, that's something which is over and above our current funding levels and requires all the 10 health watches to come together. It's not a simple situation, and we know that Healthwatch England at a national level are raising the point for us. But at the moment, there's been no resolution of that.
No. So I understand that situation. And the last thing I was going to ask, of all the things, Alex, that you updated everybody on, is there something that goes out to practices? Do you have any sort of newsletter or update for them? Because I think it's really important that they understand, you know, the work that you do and everything that feeds into Salford. And I didn't know whether there was a way that you communicate that on a regular basis. And if not, it might be something that I can you know, feed in?
Yeah, so we do produce a monthly e-bulletin and then a quarterly newsletter. So they do go out to our mailing list and also professionals within our mailing list as well. And we are developing a more robust method of trying to get out to professionals at the moment. So we are putting in a professional mailing list together. So I think if you've got some support around that to ensure that we can direct them to all surgeries and practices, that would be really supportive, because when we do key pieces of work, for example, the digital remote appointments report, that did get sent out to all practices, but I don't think we do send our newsletter and e-bulletins to practices every time. So I'd welcome that approach to supporting that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you want to include me on the comms that goes out going forward, in the interim, we can send that over to our practices. We send them information every week on various things. And we also have a website, and there's actually a page there that's sat dormant. So if there's anything that you would want to put on there or utilise, then I'd be more than happy to work with you on that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. I've just got one question, I suppose, on the community forum. I think there's a proposal there to take it forward on a bi-monthly hybrid basis. Do you, Alex or Mark, want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll start the conversation, then I'll let Mark jump in if he's got any additional points. So what we are looking at in terms of the approach to that, at the current time, it is virtual, and we're agreeing to stick to that virtual. Until we agree at a point where we are able to meet in person, we will then put that approach forward. But I think the initial planning was to look at how we could do that, which Mark sort of pulled all that together as the briefing document. And then when we got agreement to move forward into that in-face engagement, we would take that forward. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Mark?
Just a shameless plug that our next community forum is on the 3rd of August, Tuesday the 3rd, that's between 10 and 12:30, with the theme around urgent emergency care, sort of through the pandemic and beyond. So that's centering around the community, GPs, and also Salford Royal Emergency Department. So come along.
Very well done, Mark. Okay, so anything else for Alex? Okay, thank you very much, Alex. We'll now move on to another presentation, this time by Ali on her equipment services project. How are we going to get this? You're now the co-host. You can have fun now, setting it all up.
Well, you say fun. Let's see how this goes.
I had terrible problems doing something like this about a week ago, so this is much better than what I did.
Can everybody see that?
We can. Over to you.
Okay. So thanks for that, Phil. So this is a presentation on the equipment services project, which was the second project that I've done since I started with Healthwatch Salford in November. The idea for the project came from a business planning meeting that took place in February 2020 between the Adult Care Commissioner and the Healthwatch Salford board. And it was decided that we would look at wheelchair and equipment services. On further investigation from myself, liaising with the equipment services, we found out that actually they were currently looking at wheelchair services and gathering quite a lot of feedback from that side of the service. But in contrast, equipment services hadn't been looked at for over 10 years. So it was decided that that would be the focus of this project specifically. So it's part of independent living services, and they loan out equipment to help with daily living. The questionnaire, we went through a co-production with the CCG, equipment services, and we also got one of our Healthwatch Salford volunteers involved in that as well. So we produced a questionnaire, and we then mailed it out direct to a sample of 1,500 service users who've all used the service within the past 6 months. This is quite a big service. There are many thousands of people who've used the service over the last few years, and so we had to narrow it down and pick a sample. The mailing included a cover letter, a copy of the survey, a free post envelope so that they could post it back to us, and a Healthwatch Salford leaflet or postcard, giving them a bit more information about who we are and what we do. There are still some people out there who've not actually heard of us. The operational team helped us with the envelope stuffing. As you can imagine, sending out 1,500 envelopes with various contents was actually quite a big job. So I was very grateful that the team came together and helped stuff all of those envelopes, and they were then passed on to equipment services who dealt with the posting them out, labeling them and posting them out. We also shared the survey online. It was put onto Smart Survey. We put it onto our Healthwatch Salford website. We shared it through many partner organisations, and we shared it through social media. As a result of the survey and the publicity around this project, we had 49 inquiries coming through to the Healthwatch Salford office. Some of these were phone calls coming into the office, and some of them were actually bits of extra information on the survey. People had put little questions on the back of the questionnaire that they wanted answers to. 16 of those inquiries were people asking for help with their equipment. They didn't know who to contact and how to get hold of equipment services, and there was something that they needed help with their equipment, and in many cases something wrong with the equipment. So for example, one man had a wobbly walker, the brakes weren't working, and he contacted the office, and we were able to pass that message on to equipment services, and they managed to get him a new walker the next day. So that was a really positive outcome from that. Other inquiries were from people who no longer had their equipment. They'd already handed it back in, but that hadn't been updated on equipment services database. Or they had the user had sadly passed away. Again, the database hadn't been updated. And we also had calls to the office from people who needed help completing the survey. The service users, some of them were quite vulnerable and maybe weren't used to completing a survey of this type, and they wanted some help going through the questions. We also had 2 people who posted back our Healthwatch Salford postcards, and they wanted to join our newsletter mailing list, and one of them was interested in becoming a volunteer. There was a big team effort also, not just with the envelope stuffing, but also with the data inputting, because once we got all these surveys back, we then had to get them all online so that we could analyse them. So again, the operational team helped with that, and we also had 3 volunteers help with that, which was really, really valuable. And they did say that they really enjoyed being part of that process. So the response, we were really pleased that the response far exceeded our expectations. We had 335 surveys come back, which was a 22% response rate. 301 of those were completed manually, and there were 34 that were completed online. A third of them were actually completed by the carer or family member of the service user. So again, this is highlighting the vulnerability of the people that we were getting in touch with. 2/3 of them were actually completed by the service user themselves, but the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Some of the surveys that came back, it is worth saying, they didn't just answer the questions that they were asked, they were quite expansive, some of the answers, and in some cases we really got their life story. So I don't know whether this was down to lockdown, to people having a bit more time and just wanted contact with someone. So we did get some lovely answers back. Who did we reach? By targeting users direct, I think it's fair to say that we reached a more diverse audience than what Healthwatch Salford would normally reach. So, and we also got a much higher response rate on the demographic information. Quite often people will skip that section and they can't be bothered completing that. But in this case, 92% of the surveys that came back had all completed the demographic information. So 21% of those were aged under 60, 73% had a physical or mental impairment, 43% were male, 7.5% didn't identify as British, and 4.4% identified as being Jewish. In terms of quantitative feedback, what did they say? Well, the response was extremely, extremely positive about the service, overwhelmingly positive. So 92% of respondents said that the equipment meets their needs. The vast majority all rated the different parts of the service as excellent. And that's right through from the initial inquiry at the contact centre through to assessment, delivery, maintenance, reassessment. All parts of the service were rated as excellent by the vast majority of people. 98% of people were happy with the service times available. They didn't need a change to the service times that were being offered. 97% were happy with the delivery times available. Again, they didn't see a need for a change. And 93% said that their equipment was delivered on the agreed day. 80% say that they know what to do when the equipment is no longer needed. So they were confident that they would know what to do when they'd finished with it, and that they would know how to get it back. Qualitative feedback, what did they actually say? Although the response was by far overwhelmingly positive, there were some issues that were highlighted and came up, and we did have a lot of feedback of people that had had some problems with the service. So it's important to highlight that as well. So one respondent said the purchasing stool was left on the ramp outside the door. I had to get someone to put it in my flat as I was frightened of falling. Someone else said we had some difficulty initially as my dad lives above and isn't able to answer the door, but once that I explained that I needed to be rung when a delivery was to be made, this was overcome. Another one said, after the user passed away, it took several phone calls to get the equipment removed, which was a stressful time. And finally, I am partially blind and I don't know how to contact anybody. So I think this highlights the vulnerability of the service users who we were talking to, and just shows some of the issues that they face on a regular basis. So the feedback that we got, we drew that into themes, grouped it into themes of what people were saying and the issues they were facing. The first issue was around returns. People were confused over how to return the equipment and which agencies had actually supplied the equipment. There were issues over time frames. People were disappointed over delays, either in a delivery or in the installation. They were waiting for something to be installed, waiting for something to be delivered, didn't know how to get hold of people, not getting an answer. There were issues over family and carer involvement. So some family and carers hadn't been involved in a needs assessment. And as a family member or a carer, they thought that they had a really good insight into what the needs of that service user might be, and they wanted to be there as part of the assessment to give their point of view. They also wanted to be there in some cases for the delivery, because as in that previous quote that we just talked about, the service user might need help in getting the equipment in and getting access to the property. There were issues with communications. Some service users hadn't been consulted. As we said, the equipment service hadn't been in touch with people for over 10 years, so that is quite a long period of time. At the moment, the communications don't use emails, and so there isn't a regular way of keeping in touch with service users. And finally, issues with training. Some service users felt that they'd been dealt with in a rude manner, and this was a theme that had come up. So the recommendations that we drew out of those themes, in terms of returns, we recommended that the service should implement a service user agreement with clear instructions on how to return equipment, who it belongs to, and what the expectations are on behalf of the service user to keep it in good order, to keep it clean, and to report any faults with it as soon as possible. The equipment, sorry, let me go back. The equipment services response to that had been that they would introduce that as soon as applicable. The next one was around timeframes. We wanted them to have clear written communication regarding timeframes so that the expectations from the service user were realistic. And Equipment Services responded to that and said that they would update the website with performance targets so that people would have a more realistic idea about how soon to expect a delivery, how soon to expect an assessment, and what the waiting times on those are. They also said they would produce an online leaflet showing the location of the service and upload that on the council website and on the Salford Royal website. They were particularly keen that people should see a picture of where the service is located, which is a place called Burroughs House, which is in an industrial estate. It's not the easiest place to find, and they wanted to put a picture up there to show people with a map, to show people where it is, and if they wanted to return the equipment, how they could do that. And they said that they would contact all users as early as possible regarding cancelled communications. In terms of family carer involvement, we recommended that they do involve carers and family members in the arrangement of assessments and in deliveries where possible. The Equipment Services response to that was, there are different people involved in this process of assessment and with the contact centre. But for example, a lot of the assessments are normally, they call them prescribers, the people who are prescribing the equipment. And in many cases, that would be an occupational therapist, an OT. So they are going to remind these prescribers of the importance of including information about families and carer involvement where that is needed. In terms of communications, we recommended that all services should be reviewed regularly, i.e. more regularly than every 10 years. And that the service should start to collect email addresses where applicable. Not all of these service users would have email addresses, but it would be a useful way to communicate if they have them. And Equipment Services' response to that was that they would endeavour to review the service more regularly. They agreed that was something they should be doing, and they've said that they have now started collecting email addresses. In terms of training, we recommended an emphasis on empathy and an understanding of the patient journey during all the recruitment and training. We want staff to have an understanding of what the service user might be going through and some of the issues that they're facing and the impact of some of the actions. So for example, leaving a walker or a perching stool outside where the service user can't access it and can't get to it because they're scared of falling. The Equipment Services response to this was that they are providing a comprehensive training package, which is going to be developed to cover some of those areas in terms of the recruitment of staff and also the ongoing training of staff. So what happens next? The survey actually took place in February and the report was published in May. The reports and findings have been shared widely and have been received very positively, and the Equipment Services were certainly very pleased with the information that we gave them and with the very positive feedback. As Healthwatch Salford as a team, we want to use the experience and knowledge that we've gained in this project to enhance the work that we do in relation to adult social care in general. And also in the short term, I've now started working on a project on domiciliary care. And so some of the experience and information that we've gathered during this project will be used in my next project. And we are going to go back and visit the recommendations that were made. And we're going to go back in December 21 to talk to the service and just track the impact of the report, follow up and check that the recommendations were implemented and the consequences of that. So that's already been put in the calendar. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'll ask for any questions. I'll just stop sharing.
Super. Thank you very much for that, Ali, and thank you very much for the work you've done. It's really heartening to see, first of all, some very positive responses from people using the service. and very helpful reaction from the service itself to suggestions for change. I think that's all really, really welcome. Well done.
Thank you.
Questions, comments from others, please. Eve?
Sorry, you're not going to invite me again, are you? A brilliant piece of work. I think it's so important, and it's so important to get that report out there. And by stark contrast, in Trafford, sadly over COVID, the equipment store, if you like, was closed, and it's still not open. So all the patients requiring aids and access to equipment, they've not been able to gain access for quite a long time, which is obviously causing a raft of problems. So I wondered if, when you do these discrete projects, are you sharing them across GM with your Healthwatch colleagues? Because I think what you've done could be replicated, or should certainly be replicated, in Trafford, if not other parts of Greater Manchester. Is that something that you would do routinely? And if not, can I share what you've done with Trafford Healthwatch? Because I would certainly welcome it, and I know the GPs would as well.
The Healthwatch is sharing information at different levels. I've not actually, I attend an engagement, a Healthwatch officers group, and I've not shared it at that level, but I know Alex attends at a higher level. I don't know whether it's been shared at a higher level. I mean, it's available on our website, and it's very readily available, but yeah, I would definitely be happy for it to be shared with Trafford. I'll have a contact, a lower down contact with Trafford myself, but Alex, has it been shared higher up?
The piece of work has been shared with colleagues, but I don't know if it's gone to the aspects of, you know, each individual Healthwatch. So that's something we're more than happy to follow up and share across our network of 10 Greater Manchester Healthwatches, of course.
Brilliant.
I'm really sad to hear, Eve, that service has been closed during the pandemic. I just think that's absolutely a devastation for those service users. And if the service can carry on in one locality, it's a shame it couldn't carry on in Trafford.
Yeah, we're trying to get it stood back, because obviously, because community rehab was stepped down as well, as part of the COVID response. So there's a lot of people waiting for community rehab and the equipment that they need. So hopefully that will change soon. But it's really great to see that hasn't been the case in Salford, and actually people's view of the service is pretty good on the whole. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eve. Thank you, Ali. Anything else on this? Okay, in that case, we note it with thanks. Just moving on to the remainder of the business for this part of the meeting. We have the business plan RAG update from you, Alex, which I think is nearly all green.
It is, Phil, yes, correct. So I'm not going to go through the individual aspects of the report. There are note sections within the report to highlight the two areas that we are on amber. The one amber is around the skills audit for board members, which we are going to send out for completion, just to really highlight the skill areas that we have throughout the organisation, not just at board level, but throughout our volunteers as well. So that's something that we are working towards. And then our work around impact and making a difference toolkit. We are going to take to part 2 a discussion around the theory of change model, and obviously following that discussion, we'll then be able to update the RAG rating in that particular area. So happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? In that case, noted. Thank you very much for that and the update. Representatives' feedback. This is to allow Kate and Jay to report back on the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Panel, but also any other board members with anything else to report as a representative. Kate, is there anything you want to add at the moment?
No, because I was on holiday when the last meeting was, and that's the first one we've had in ages. So No.
Okay, thanks. Is there anything else from anybody? Is there any other business in this part of the meeting? In that case, I call this part of the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, Eve, for being part of this session today. I hope that's helped with a bit of acclimatization to what we do as a Healthwatch and Healthwatch board, for that matter.
Yes. Thank you very much.